Okay, I first found this video a couple months ago, but I initially did not want to cover it because, well, it's about a year and a half old. However, then I watched it 2 days ago, and I determined that I really want to cover it because it is terrible. Tonight's commentary is on hypochromia, which, for those who do not know, is a medical condition where your red blood cells have less color than they should. And if that does not fill you with confidence regarding the presenter of this video, I don't know what will. For the record, I didn't cut anything out. We're just immediately plopped into the video without any context or introduction to the topic in question. I know I don't always give particularly thorough introductions in my commentaries, but at the very least, I always make sure that you hear my voice before I start covering the video. Meanwhile, in one-shots, I always put the name of the channel I'm covering, the name of the video I'm covering, and the original upload date on screen during the first 5 seconds of footage of that video, specifically to avoid confusion. Hypo just begins the video she's commentating on without giving any introduction to what she's commentating on, leaving the audience confused.
All right, class. Can anyone tell me who invented the light bulb?
Thomas Edison!
That's not entirely true. The light bulb could more rightfully be attributed to Lewis Latimer, the black inventor behind the filament inside the bulb.
Okay, but like the filament inside the light bulb, part of the material used to make the bulb, and the light bulb itself are two different things.
Well, you can't argue with that. With that said, what the PSA is actually saying is that it's Latimer's design that got commercially popular as opposed to Edison's. It should also be noted that the PSA was not making this out to be anything more than a slightly different perspective on history, saying that it could more rightfully be attributed to Latimer, again because it was Latimer's design that actually became commercially successful. Lastly, what's with this drag and drop editing style you insist on having throughout this video? It's incredibly annoying.
Also, Lewis Latimer didn't invent the filament used in the first light bulb. He made the carbon filament and made the light bulb more durable and last longer.
And created the design that actually became commercially successful.
And while yes, it is a good thing and he did perfect it and it should be more widely acknowledged, creating and updating are two different things.
Well, wait a minute, how do you want to define updating exactly? Because Edison himself did update the design for the light bulb many times, because his previous designs wouldn't work. Although scholars dispute if this actually happened, there's a very famous story of somebody asking Edison how it felt to fail creating a light bulb 10,000 times. He replied with, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that wouldn't work." Was the actual inventor of the light bulb the first person to come up with the idea of using electricity to light a room? Or are we gonna go full Peter Kropotkin and say that all belongs to all? I'm not even necessarily opposed to that, I just want to know what direction we should be going in here. The point of this statement is not to tell children that everything they know is wrong and that they've been lied to, it's to inform them that actually the answer is a tad more complicated than they might realize. Because history is one of those fields with surprisingly few clear answers, because when you attempt to get a clear answer, you end up with ridiculous standards like, well, like the one Hypo just gave.
If by that, then I guess Fire Emblem Binding Blade wasn't released in 2002. It was actually released in 2019 because it was an Iron Man patch that made the weapon triangle better and made less units suck dick. I'm looking at you, Treg, Wade, Saul, Zelia, OJ, Wendy, Barth, Cass, Sophia, Hugh.
Professor and Mary Ann.
These textbooks are incomplete. There were black Roman warriors, black medieval knights, black classical musicians, black cowboys, black fighter pilots. Where are they?
Okay, so originally I was going to cover this point, then I didn't. And now I'm doing it again, but this is unscripted and I have more to say.
Okay, I already find it annoying when most commentators do this. I originally wasn't going to cover this point, but in editing I decided I would thing, because it does nothing more than break the flow of the video. But here, I'm just confused by your inclusion of it, considering originally you were going to cover this point. Okay, nice behind the scenes details. What does it add to the video to go? I wasn't sure if I was going to cover this point at first, so I have a flower I'm going to pick petals off of. I'm going to cover this point, I'm going to cover this point not. I'm going to cover this point, I'm going to cover this point not. For fuck's sake, just cover the point already! I know you're going to cover it because this is a commentary, and the only reason you interjected is because you have something to say.
So basically, you're saying that where's the Black Roman warriors, and although, yeah, those do exist, they're mainly because Rome was at the time where they colonized a bunch of northern Africa?
Okay, you probably should have actually cut this point because I'm not even sure what you just said counts as a complete sentence. Even giving this point the benefit of the doubt and translating it into sense, it still doesn't work as a refutation to what the PSA said. Yeah, Rome colonized parts of northern Africa, therefore there were Black Roman warriors. And the PSA is saying that it's incredibly strange that many history textbooks only show pictures of white Roman warriors.
Also, they teach Black history, yeah, but the main people that did anything like Rosa Parks, Washington Carver, and Martin Luther King Jr.
First off, if you want to make a point that people are educated about Black history, I'd recommend not getting one of the people you mentioned's names wrong. It's George Washington Carver, not Washington Carvey. He's not related to Dana Carvey. Second off, what do you mean by the people who did anything? A lot of times, history, especially if we're talking about history created among average people, especially average people of marginalized groups, is created not through active action by the people who become recognized historically, but through the actions of others in response to what they've done. For example, Emmett Till didn't do anything besides maybe wolf whistle at a white girl when he was 14. The reason why people know his name is because after doing that, he was abducted and lynched. In fact, it was the fact that he did so little and got such a massive, will be professional and say reaction that caused his story to get national attention in the first place. Lastly, is that all history is to you? Just a handful of names? Because history is primarily about the circumstances, situations, and environments that occurred in the past. Saying, I know Black history because I know who Washington Carvey is the equivalent of saying, I know American history because I know who Benjamin Franklin is. No, you don't. That's not how this works.
And if you're talking about where are the Black people in these sorts of history, should we also talk about the negatives as well, like Black slave owners? Which, yes, they do exist, and there are a lot more than you think.
Okay, I crunched these numbers, and according to this statistic, of all the slaves that were owned in the United States at the time, 0.6%, or 3 in every 500, were owned by Black people. It should also be noted that Black people outnumbered white people in many parts of the South. Of course, 3 in 500 is still more than 0 in 500, and I would be fine with it being mentioned in a history curriculum, on the condition that it was made clear that it was incredibly rare and that slavery was primarily driven by white people.
Ask yourself as you're learning history, who's telling the story? Was this modified to make white readers comfortable?
The concept of learning about colonization, how a good majority of textbooks contain examples of how white people took over several areas of the world, and themes that show white people in the bad light literally destroys this, as well as the segregation area in which the white people were in the wrong, and didn't hide any of their wrongdoings.
You know there were more segregationists than Bull Connor, right? Also, are you going to give any examples to back up your claim? Because when people have actually looked into this, they found that, well, to be blunt, you're wrong. For more information, check out James Lowen's book, Lies My Teacher Told Me. It's a little old, but as somebody who's looked into this more recently, just know that it still is very relevant. Anyway, that's all I care to cover, so final thoughts. I originally wasn't going to put final thoughts in this video, and I have exactly 0 plans of changing that. Good night, and good luck.